Most people think a last World Cup is about one player getting old. It is not. It is about time finally catching up with an entire football era. And 2026 might be the clearest example we have ever seen. Because when the World Cup arrives in Canada, Mexico, and the United States, the tournament will not only be bigger, it will be heavier. 48 teams, 104 matches, 12 groups of 4, a new round of 32, more countries, more stories, more paths. But hidden inside that expansion is a quieter story. For some of football's biggest names, this may be the final time the world sees them inside the one tournament that made them feel permanent. Lionel Messi will be 39 during the tournament. Cristiano Ronaldo will be 41. Luka Modric will be 40. Robert Lewandowski will be 37. Luis Suarez will be 39. Neymar will be 34. Kevin De Bruyne will be 35. Virgil van Dijk will be 35. Mohamed Salah will be 34. Harry Kane will be 32. Son Heung-min will be 33. Antoine Griezmann will be 35. For some of them, 2026 is almost certainly the end. For others, it is not mathematically impossible to continue. But that is exactly the point. The World Cup does not ask if you can still play one more season. It asks if your body, your national team, your manager, your federation, your qualifying route, and your timing can all survive another 4-year cycle. That is the part most fans miss. A club career declines slowly. A World Cup career ends suddenly. One tournament, you are still the face of the game. The next tournament, you are watching from somewhere else. This is the strange cruelty of international football. It does not move year by year. It moves in 4-year blocks. And when a player is already in his mid-30s, 4 years is not time. 4 years is a wall. That is why 2026 feels different. It is not just another World Cup. It is the possible closing ceremony of the Messi and Ronaldo age, the Modric age, the Lewandowski age, the Neymar age, the age when the biggest footballers on earth were not only club superstars, but national symbols. And to understand why, we need to stop looking at players as names. We need to look at the system around them. The first part of the system is age. Age in football is not just a number. It is a negotiation. A young player spends energy like it is unlimited. An older player spends energy like money. Every sprint has a cost. Every recovery takes longer. Every injury carries more memory. This does not mean older players are finished. Actually, the best ones often become smarter. Messi in 2022 did not run like the Messi of 2011. But he controlled moments better than almost anyone in the tournament. He knew when to walk, when to wait, when to pull a defender one step out of shape, and when to turn a simple touch into a goal-scoring situation. Modric did the same for Croatia. He was not winning games by covering every blade of grass. He was winning them by understanding which blade of grass mattered. That is the hidden advantage of age. You lose speed, but you gain interpretation. But the World Cup is not a normal environment. It compresses pressure. It compresses travel. It compresses recovery. It turns one small physical problem into a national crisis. In a league season, a star can miss 2 matches and return quietly. In a World Cup, 2 missed matches can be the entire story. This is why older players face a different tournament than younger players. They are not only playing opponents, they are playing the calendar. And in 2026, the calendar is bigger. FIFA expanded the Men's World Cup from 32 teams to 48. The new format uses 12 groups of 4, with the top 2 from each group and the 8 best third-place teams moving into a round of 32. That means the champion can now play 8 matches instead of 7. One more match sounds small. It is not. For a young squad, one more match is a challenge. For an aging superstar, one more match is an entire extra mountain. That is the framework of this video. Age creates limits. Format creates distance. National teams create dependency. Timing creates endings. And when those 4 things meet, even legends cannot negotiate forever. Start with Messi. For almost 2 decades, Argentina carried the question that followed him everywhere. Could the greatest club player of his generation win the World Cup? In Qatar, that question finally ended. Argentina won the 2022 World Cup. And Messi's story changed from pursuit to completion. That matters, because once a story is complete, the next tournament becomes different. It is no longer about proving he belongs with history. He already does. It is about whether he can extend the ending without damaging the memory. That is a very different kind of pressure. In 2026, if Messi plays, the tournament becomes less about a rival and more about farewell. Every touch carries history. Every free kick feels like a possible final image. Every camera shot becomes part of the archive. But Argentina are not just Messi anymore. That is the twist. The 2022 team was built around him emotionally, but not helplessly. Julian Alvarez, Enzo Fernandez, Alexis McAllister, and other younger players gave Argentina legs around Messi's brain. The system protected the legend by not forcing the legend to do everything. That is how older stars survive. They do not defeat time alone. They borrow energy from the team. Now look at Ronaldo. His story is different because his relationship with time has always been more confrontational. Ronaldo's career has been built on refusal. Refusal to slow down. Refusal to accept limits. Refusal to let age define the terms before he does. By 2026, he will be 41. That is not normal for a World Cup forward. It is not even normal for a World Cup squad leader. If Ronaldo appears in 2026, the story is not simply whether he can score. The story is what role Portugal chooses to give him. Is he still the center of the attack? Is he a specialist weapon? Is he a leader whose presence is larger than his minutes? That question tells us something important. The last World Cup of a star is often not when he loses talent. It is when the team can no longer organize itself around the old version of him. Portugal have a deeper generation now. Bruno Fernandes, Bernardo Silva, Rafael Leao, Joao Felix, and others changed the balance of power inside the team. The country that once needed Ronaldo as the entire symbol now has multiple ways to create danger. That is good for Portugal, but it also changes Ronaldo's place in the story. And that is where last World Cups become emotionally complicated. Fans want legends to end as kings. Football often asks them to end as pieces inside someone else's system. Modric may be the purest example of time as intelligence. Croatia's modern World Cup identity is almost impossible to explain without him. In 2018, Croatia reached the final. In 2022, they reached the semifinals. For a country of Croatia's size, that is not just success. That is structural overachievement. And Modric was the brain of it. He turned midfield into a control room. He made pressure feel slower. He made matches feel readable. But in 2026, the question is brutal. How long can a national team keep building its emotional center around a player who is 40? This is not disrespect, it is physics. The World Cup punishes tired legs. Knockout football punishes one late step. Midfield punishes hesitation because hesitation opens space, and space becomes danger. Still, Modric shows why endings are hard to predict. Some players decline because their game depended on speed. Others survive because their game was always about timing. Modric belongs to the second group. But even timing eventually needs legs to carry it. Lewandowski's case is another kind of problem. For Poland, he has been more than a striker. He has been the entire attacking expectation. When a player scores at club level for years, fans begin to believe goals are personal property. But international football is not club football. At club level, Lewandowski spent his best years inside systems designed to feed him. Borussia Dortmund, Bayern Munich, Barcelona, those teams could surround him with repeated patterns, rehearsed movements, and constant service. With Poland, the equation has often been harder. The national team cannot buy the perfect support cast. It has to work with the generation it has. That is the second system behind a last World Cup. Your ending is not only about your body, it is about your country's talent cycle. A striker can still be elite in the box. But if the team cannot move the ball into the box often enough, the legend becomes isolated. He becomes a symbol waiting for service that never arrives. That is why Lewandowski's final World Cup story is not just about goals. It is about dependency. How much can one player still carry when the tournament around him has become faster, larger, and less forgiving? Then there is Neymar. Neymar is harder to place because he is younger than several names on this list. In 2026, he will be 34. That is old for a winger, but not ancient for a creative forward. So why does 2026 still feel like a possible final chapter? Because Neymar's career has never been measured only by age. It has been measured by injuries, expectation, and the strange pressure of being Brazil's chosen genius after the age of Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Rivaldo, and Kaká. Brazil do not treat talent as talent. Brazil treat talent as inheritance. That is a heavy shirt. In 2014, Neymar's injury against Colombia changed Brazil's tournament before the semifinal against Germany. In 2018, he arrived after injury and became part of a team eliminated by Belgium. In 2022, Brazil looked powerful, but Croatia forced the match into penalties and the dream disappeared again. That is how World Cups work. They do not always give the biggest stars a clean ending. Sometimes they give them fragments, an injury, a missed chance, a penalty shootout, a camera shot after the whistle. For Neymar, 2026 could be one last attempt to turn brilliance into closure. But Brazil's next generation also changes the question. Vinicius Jr., Rodrigo, Endrick, and others represent a future that does not need to wait forever. That is the quiet tension. Neymar may still be special, but Brazil may no longer be only a story. Kevin De Bruyne faces the same kind of transition with Belgium. Belgium's golden generation was one of the great modern examples of talent concentration. De Bruyne, Eden Hazard, Romelu Lukaku, Thibaut Courtois, Vincent Kompany, Jan Vertonghen, Toby Alderweireld. For years, the question was not whether Belgium had players. The question was whether Belgium could turn those players into a trophy. They came closest at the 2018 World Cup when they beat Brazil and reached the semifinal before losing to France. That team felt like a peak, not just of players, but of timing. And timing is everything. By 2026, De Bruyne will be 35. His passing range may still be elite. His football brain may still be elite. But Belgium's old window has changed shape. That is another lesson. A last World Cup is sometimes not the end of the player. It is the end of the window around the player. The same applies to Van Dijk with the Netherlands. Center backs can age differently from wingers. Their game can survive through positioning, anticipation, and leadership. But tournament football still attacks the body. Quick transitions, extra time, short rests, one race into open space. At 35, a defender can still be world-class, but the margin becomes thinner. And the World Cup loves thin margins. Salah's story is even more uncertain because qualification and national context matter so much. He is one of the defining club forwards of his generation. But the World Cup has not been as generous to Egypt as club football was to Liverpool. In 2018, Egypt returned to the tournament after a long absence. But Salah arrived carrying injury concerns from the Champions League final. That is the international game in one image. A club season creates the injury. A nation inherits the consequence. By 2026, Salah will be 34. That does not automatically mean the end. But another 4-year cycle would take him toward 38. For a wide forward whose game has included acceleration, sharp movement, and repeated sprints, that is a difficult road. So if 2026 is his last World Cup, the story is not failure. It is scarcity. Some great players get 5 World Cups. Some get 1. Some get none. The tournament is not a pure ranking of greatness. It is a meeting point between talent and circumstance. That is why we should be careful with the phrase, every star's last World Cup. Football does not give us certainty in advance. It gives us probability. Messi may decide one thing. Ronaldo may decide another. Neymar's body may answer before he does. Modric may continue to make logic look wrong. A younger star may suffer one injury at the wrong time. An older star may survive because his role changes perfectly. But the broader pattern is clear. The generation that dominated football conversation from roughly 2008 to 2022 is now entering its final World Cup cycle. And that changes how we watch. When a young player loses a World Cup match, we say he will be back. When an older player loses one, we do not know. That uncertainty creates a different emotional weight. It turns ordinary group matches into possible farewells. It turns substitutions into symbols. It turns a player walking slowly toward the touchline into a national memory. We have seen this before. Zinedine Zidane's final match was the 2006 World Cup final. Not a quiet goodbye, not a clean goodbye. A headbutt, a red card, and one of the most famous exits in sports history. Andres Iniesta and Xavi were part of Spain's golden age. But by 2014, the same team that had controlled world football collapsed in the group stage. The ending came faster than the reputation. Gianluigi Buffon never got a 2018 World Cup farewell because Italy failed to qualify. That may be the harshest version of all. Sometimes a legend's last World Cup is not a match. Sometimes it is the absence of one. This is why 2026 matters. It is a tournament of expansion, but also a tournament of endings. FIFA made the World Cup larger. More teams, more matches, more markets, more pathways. But the careers inside it are not expanding. They are narrowing. The tournament grows. The legends shrink toward the final frame. And there is something beautiful about that contrast. Because football is always doing two things at once. It introduces the next generation while quietly removing the last one. Lamine Yamal, Jude Bellingham, Kylian Mbappe, Vinicius Jr., Jamal Musiala, Florian Wirtz, Endrick, and others represent the next shape of the game. They are not waiting politely outside the door. They are already inside the room. But the older stars are still there too. That is what makes 2026 powerful. It is not only a competition between countries. It is a handover. One generation trying to write one last chapter, while another generation starts writing the first chapters of its own mythology. And fans will feel that even if they cannot explain it. When Messi receives the ball, people will lean forward differently. When Ronaldo stands over a chance, the stadium will understand the history of the moment. When Modric turns away from pressure, it will feel like watching an old language still being spoken perfectly. When Neymar dribbles, there will be the old question again. Is this finally the moment? That is the emotional product of the tournament. Not just who wins, who leaves. Because World Cups are remembered through champions, but they are felt through farewells. The winner lifts the trophy, but the camera also finds the player sitting on the grass, staring at nothing, understanding before everyone else that the door may have closed. That image is part of the World Cup too, maybe the most honest part. So when people say 2026 could be every major star's last World Cup, they are not really talking about a list of names. They are talking about the end of a football world, a world where Messi and Ronaldo defined the ceiling, a world where Modric made midfield feel timeless, a world where Neymar carried Brazil's imagination, a world where Lewandowski, Salah, De Bruyne, Van Dijk, Son, Kane, Suarez, Griezmann, and others gave national teams a face, a story, and a reason to believe. The next World Cup after 2026 will be in 2030. That is the number that changes everything. Add 4 years to every player on this list. Then ask the question again. Not can they play football? Can they still survive the World Cup system? Can they still survive qualification? Can they still be selected? Can they still recover every 3 or 4 days? Can they still carry a nation when the tournament turns cruel? That is why 2026 may not feel like a normal World Cup. It may feel like football saying goodbye to the players who shaped how an entire generation understood greatness. And the strangest part is that we will not know the final moment when it arrives. It may look like a missed shot. It may look like a substitution. It may look like a penalty shootout. It may look like a player walking alone after the final whistle. Only later will we realize what we saw. Most people think a last World Cup is about one player getting old. But it is not. It is about time finally catching up with an entire football era. And when 2026 is finished, the biggest question may not be who won the tournament. It may be which football world quietly ended while we were watching. Tell me in the comments which star you think deserves the perfect final World Cup moment.